Well, hello, and it's welcome from FIPP's headquarters here in London. I'm Chris Llewellyn, FIPP's CEO, and welcome to our latest webinar. Today, I have with me two speakers. It's Esther Brass-Benning, who's the Media Knowledge Manager of the Press Belgium. She's also the chair of our research committee. And with Esther is Guy Constantine, who is the CEO of Guy Constantine Associates. He's FIPP's research consultant, but more importantly, he's author of the report we're going to be talking about today, the Proof of Performance. The objectives of Proof of Performance are fourfold, really. We're going to review some of the research-based evidence on how consumers are using printed and digital magazine content around the world. We're going to demonstrate the effectiveness of the advertising these media carry, and we're going to present a narrative of the case for magazine media. And it's a narrative which applies in any country and could be populated with local research evidence. And finally, we hope to stimulate ideas for publishers and others in planning their own research programs, because some of the studies we cover are absolutely groundbreaking. How can I synthesize that in one simple slide? Very simply, POP version 2 is going to present evidence from 122 studies from more than 30 countries from all over the world. And it's important to know we launched the POP report, the Proof of Performance report, in mid-2012. This is version 2, the update, and 60% of the material is completely new. So without further ado, two more things. Questions. There's a box that you can see on your screen to the left where you can ask questions to the presenters as we go along. If they're questions for clarification, I will ask them during the course of the meeting. Otherwise, I will ask them at the end. And secondly, because I know we'll get lots of requests, I will explain at the end of this webinar how to get hold of a copy of the report and how to get a hold of a copy of this presentation. Esther, over to you.
Well, hello everyone. I'm trying to get to the next slide where we have the topics of today's webinar. We will start with the first chapter actually of the Proof of Performance book, which is about connected consumers, telling about the new ways in which people connect with magazines and vice versa, of course. Then we'll talk about digital editions and what we now know from research around the world about the usage of digital editions and the way advertising works. Same for publishers' websites and social media then. This is all quite new research that you'll find in the Proof of Performance book after today. And then we'll move on because it's a lot digital because, well, that's on everyone's mind for the moment. But the established values of print still continue, of course. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we'll compare magazines to other media. This has been done in the former version, but there is a lot of interesting new research on that. And last but not least, we'll go to the proof of performance of magazines of magazine media for advertisers. First, KPIs, so more in general KPIs that are where magazines can contribute, and then specifically on sales. And we'll end with media mix models. So, to start off, I will hand over to Guy.
Thank you, Esther, and hello, everyone. This first chart, we've chosen to underline a theme running through the book as a whole, that magazine readers these days are connected with magazine content through a whole range of platforms, and they move seamlessly from one platform to another according to what they're looking for, according to their situation. Now, what this chart presents some data from a study conducted by IPC Media, which is now rebranded as Time Inc. And it was among readers of 7 of their magazines, people who are multi-platform users. Going across the top of the chart, we have several different situations or locations, and going down we have 5 types of ways of accessing magazine content. And if you look at the first column, you see that when people are at home, they are using in a major way all 5 of these means. There's a big tick in each position in that column. So they're using print, tablets, desktops, mobiles, and involved in social media when they're at home. When they're at work, the principal ways of using magazine content is through tablets or desktop machines or laptops. When they're commuting, it's mobiles, as one might expect. On holiday, it's print copies principally. And when they're out and about, social media is the most significant of the media this group of readers is using. So it's a general illustration of how these days consumers are very much using different platforms to access magazine content according to where they are and what it is they're looking for. So I'll hand back to Esther for the next point.
So talking about digital editions, this is chapter 4 in the book. The main conclusion is that consumers use digital editions in much the same way as they use printed magazines, and as for as long. And that is what you see here on the slide. Digital editions are becoming much more important for readers and for advertisers. And the primary reason for reading digital is that the content is really easy to access. So I'm going a little bit over the information from the chapter, not just on what you see on the slide. So the current share of digital editions in total circulation is still quite small. In most countries, very small, and the biggest at the moment that we've seen is 3.8% in the US. I just want to say that we've just talked about new material from Magazine Media 360, which shows that the demand for magazine media content is increasing, and even with more than 10% within a year. Very interesting to have a look at their material, which was a little bit too late for us to include in the book, so maybe next time. And then on the slide we are looking at, you see data from GfK in the US about the reading time in minutes for digital and print editions. There are differences between the different frequencies of publications, as you see here. You see all titles and then split weeklies, bi-weeklies, monthlies and bi-monthlies. But the general trend is that reading time for digital editions is a little longer than for print editions. Average reading time for digital is 54 minutes, and for printed editions it's 39 minutes. So there is, from several researchers, the conclusion is that reading time for digital editions differs very little. For instance, we also have research from Meredith and Condé Nast in the book. And Condé Nast also showing that the total reading time of a magazine is highest for people who read both print and digital formats. So we also have good evidence that printed digital editions will coexist, at least for now, and they will each claim their own place in the lives of consumers. Because we know also that the use of both printed and digital editions is quite common now. So I'll move to the next slide. And here we look a bit further at digital editions, but then on the advertising side of things. So with a huge database and long-standing reputation of ad testing, MRI Starch and Starch Digital, which is for tablet ads, is a very good source to compare advertising in printed and digital editions. This graph is from their conference paper, Magazine Digital Editions, which makes really very interesting reading. They conclude that print and digital magazine ads are noted equally well, but digital ads provoke more action. Other research confirmed this as being a general trend. People who see digital ads are especially more active in web searching, which will not come as a surprise, I would think. But action taken also includes talking to others and actual purchase. So digital readers were substantially more likely to visit advertisers' websites and look for more information. They were also more likely to recommend the product or service to others. I wonder, and this is really not in the book, but maybe we'll find out from new research in the future, if that is because of the ease of recommending online and via social media, or maybe there are other reasons. There was no difference in purchase consideration between the print and the digital readers. So the variations per product category that you see in the MRI database, which are common for the tested print magazine advertising, are replicated by the tablet ads. Another one on digital editions before I give back to Guy. The degree of interactivity in digital advertising is still quite low for the moment. It was less than 1% of the ads that MRI starts measured. Many tablet ads don't include interactive features yet, which is a pity, as research very clearly shows that these not only increase the time spent on the ad, but also the engagement. We're looking at a piece of research from Adobe, and which suggests that the average time spent would increase dwell time, so the time spent on the ad, by 45% compared with a static ad. That's a very big rise. It sounds quite logic to me, as interactivity makes people dwell longer on the ad. So we can conclude that there's a lot of room for improvement where digital ads are concerned. If the general level of creative work rises, so will the ad impact. And then of the, as you see here in this graph, of the different interactive features, video seems to have the most impact on time spent. Digital readers really do believe that it is fun to interact with ads, and that is also what tablet ads are all about. They really like to interact with video or any other features in there. And the more features, interactive features, the ad is appreciated better. So now I give back to Guy.
Thank you. Now this chart turns to publishers' websites, and it shows that advertising on publishers' websites can lift sales and generate sales. This is from a study by Meredith using their Meredith Sales Guarantee system in the United States, where there are two matched samples using the Nielsen household purchase panel, and the samples are matched in terms of their general product purchasing, but there's a control sample who have not seen any of the advertisements on the Meredith magazine websites. They are compared with similar respondents who have seen the websites that are carrying the ads. That's to say, the Meredith websites. And up to now, 10 food products have been studied in this way. And the bar chart shows that for all 10 of them, there was a sales uplift among the people who'd seen the advertising on the websites. And it ranged from a 1% increase at one end of the scale to more than 20% increase at the other end of the scale. And the average is about 10%, as calculated as a conventional mean. The median, the sort of middle value, is about 5 or 6%. So quite significant sales increases achieved amongst those who'd seen the advertising on the websites. Now we might say, why is this? Why does it work? Well, it's partly because publishers' print editions and websites complement each other, and the innate values of the print brands, such as trust, transfer onto their websites. And there's a good deal of research in the book which talks about the transference of trust. And publishers' websites' self-selected audience means the ads have got a high relevance to the site's visitors. So that's the kind of reason for these good results. Another example is this study from Bauer Publishers in the UK, where for their weekly magazine Heat, they carried out a neuroscience study looking at brain scans. What this chart is showing is two matched samples of people who've seen advertising for a selected list of advertisers in Heat print magazine, and then one part of the sample has seen companion advertising for the same product on the Heat website, and that's the group on the left, while a matched sample has seen the advertising only on other websites. And from the different colors of the brain scans, one can see much higher mental activity amongst the people who saw the web advertising on the Heat website. And basically it is showing that the consistent branding across the platforms does improve the response by consumers. So I hand over now to Esther to tell us about social media.
Social media, it's the third chapter in the book that's on digital and everything online. And like digital editions and websites, social media are an opportunity for magazines to interact with their community on a continuous basis, and vice versa, of course. Magazines really are about communities, and so are social media. It's a great natural match if used well. So what we see here is a graph from the Touchpoint survey in the UK, and their research, the analysis of the Touchpoint database really showed magazine readers to be conversation catalysts. That is, defined as people with a large social network who regularly give recommendations in multiple product categories. This is especially true of online magazine readers, and of course a very valuable thing for advertisers. So compared to all adults in the research, the online magazine audience contains much more of people who regularly give recommendations on multiple product categories. So you see the top bar, the difference of the score with the second bar, which is radio and music listeners, is so big that we need to use a trick in the graph here and shorten it a little bit. It really shows the value of online magazine readers. Then to the next one, also about social media, but then again more about the advertising side of things. This is a study from Belgium where they compared premium content websites with social media as generators of online conversations. For this they analyzed over 6,000 brand mentions, and I must say I'm work in Belgium, and my colleague from OPPA published this study last year. Its main conclusion was that 9 out of 10 online visitors talk about brands regularly. These conversations are inspired in the first place by their own brand experience, for instance from a purchase, but secondly from advertising, and thirdly from online content. So looking more closely at the advertising then, they saw that advertising that sparks brand conversations is mostly from printed magazines and newspapers, 36%, followed at a distance by television, 19%, and content websites. Social media accounts for 8% only. Most brand conversations still take place offline, of course. It's 87%. But for online brand conversations, as we see in this graph, content websites influence them much more than social media. As OPPA concluded, sites where content is written by journalists create reasons for consumers to talk about brands and create buzz.
Now, in this digital age, the established values of print still continue, and we have a whole chapter in the book on that with a lot of evidence that what we always understood about print and its advantages still hold true. This is a little chart just to underline why. If you have a look at the left-hand side of the chart, we have a bunch of consumers, each of whom has their own personal interests, their own personalities. There's also a range of magazines with their own interests, and each has its own personality. So that when you get a match between a consumer and a magazine that not only follows the same interest, but the personalities match, you get a true relationship developing. And we show that on the right-hand side. So if we start at the top right, the effect of this strong relationship between reader and magazine is that much of the reading is devoted to very personal, private me time. The individual savors the magazine moment with focused attention, very little multitasking compared with other media. And there's a lot of repeat reading, and on average, pages get exposed 2 or more times, including the ad pages. We find that magazines are read very thoroughly. Timeless content is kept for reference. Consumers make time to read their favorite magazines, and underlying all this is a great feeling of trust. So that, in a nutshell, sums up the strengths of print. We'll now move on to magazines and other media.
So as media agencies and advertisers do, we also need to put magazine media in the total complex media landscape. Chapter 7 of Proof of Performance covers all research that makes a direct comparison of magazine media with other media. We are looking here at a graph from a study done by Adobe in the US, and it's called Click Here. This is a broad study into the state of online advertising. We only listed the media here, but the original graph covered more in general who or what people pay undivided attention to. On number 1 is speed limits, just so you know, and on number 2, the partner. And of the media that were questioned, the absolute number 1 was advertising in printed magazines and newspapers. The character of printed media, the activity of reading, demands the full attention of the consumer, something that advertising benefits from, as we see here in this graph. From the same study, favorite magazines are the preferred place for consumers to look at advertising, and with 45%. Second only is the favorite TV show, with 23%. And on the next slide, this is a graph from the awarded Media Connections study by Magazines Canada, together with Brand Spark. They talked to 3,000 Canadian consumers and covered 3 sectors, food, beauty, and automotive in their research. This study is a very good all-round source of information about the way people use magazine media today. This is just one example here. People feel in control when they are using magazines, more than television or online. Control is important to people. As we saw before in touchpoint analysis, it makes them feel good, and being in a good mood makes you more receptive to messages, thus to advertising. Consumers also feel that reading a magazine is a better use of their time. That's the second or the third, fourth, and the fourth, fifth, and sixth bar that you see in the graph. Sorry. Usefulness is something that we see linked to magazine media in more studies. Readers feel they really get something out of magazine reading. And also on other criteria that the study covered, such as the medium has information I trust and feeling engaged, magazine media outdid television and online. Then this, of course, has an effect on the way people regard magazine advertising. Because they are in control, they don't feel negative about advertising. It doesn't interrupt their magazine experience. Research from around the globe confirms this. magazine advertising is appreciated. So what we show here is an example from India, no less. Only 17% of respondents regard magazine ads as interruptions, and only 16% believes they should be eliminated from magazines. As you see from the top bars of the two graphs, and that's totally different with television. Magazine advertising is much more a natural part of the medium. It's additional content, and often with beautiful visuals. That is one thing I need to remark that's so interesting about the proof of performance is that findings from countries with totally different cultures and media landscapes are so similar when we talk about the bigger picture of magazine media, the big strength of the medium. Reading a magazine in India apparently doesn't provoke such different experience from reading in the Netherlands.
We're turning now to evidence of the effectiveness in terms of return on investment of magazine media. Magazine media do make a big contribution at all stages of the consumer journey, from awareness of the ads, awareness of the advertiser, through intermediate stages right up to purchase consideration. And there's a good deal of research on this point. This particular chart comes from the Canadian study that Esther mentioned a short while ago. Going down on the left-hand side of the chart, we've got the figures for 4 media: television, printed magazines, online, and out of home. And what the Canadians have done here is to look at the total investment, in this case on food advertising, across all brands in Canada in 2012, and looked at the profile of expenditure. So television accounted for more than 70% of all the food advertising. Print magazines accounted for 8%. The next column shows a measure of the impact on purchasing decisions. Now, TV accounted for only 20% of the impact of the advertising on this measure. Print magazines, 15%, and you see the figures for the other media. Now, we can divide the impact by the share of impact by share of cost to look at the relative cost efficiencies or return on investment, which we have in the last column. So indexing those numbers on TV as 1.0, print magazines have an average of 6.7, online 4.2, and out of home 8.7. So those 3 media all a good deal more cost effective on this measure than the television advertising. Now, here's something from Germany which looks at the same point. The first of the pie charts shows the profile of advertising spending across 4 media for 906 case studies carried out by the German Ad Impact Monitor program of research. Here you can see that magazines accounted for 23% of the expenditure across these brands. TV was 59%. The second pie chart shows the share of effect. Now, effect is an aggregation across these studies of a series of measures from awareness of the advertising through to purchase consideration. So aggregating across 906 brands and across these 6 measures of effect, magazines delivered 33% of the effect. And you can see what it is for online and for newspapers. For TV, it's only 43%. So TV took 59% of the budget, but delivered 43% of the effect. Magazines with 23% of the budget delivered 33% of the effect. So we can index all 4 of those media in terms of return on efficiency, dividing the share of effect by the share of expenditure. And that's shown on this next slide. So indexing TV as 100. Newspapers come out at 164. Magazines 197, so double the return on investment of TV expenditure. And online just over 200. So we now go over to, rather than the intermediate measures of prior to the sales, we'll have a look at some sales data.
So sales, of course, is one of the most important KPIs for advertising. And this is covered in Chapter 9 of Proof of Performance. Magazines can generate sales on their own and as part of the media mix. And what you see before you now in this graph is one of the most impressive programs I've come across ever, I believe. Meredith in the US shows the world that they are convinced about the sales effect of magazines by giving advertisers a sales guarantee. The guarantee that your brand will have a sales uplift when you advertise in their magazine brands. This approach is based on a research methodology which quantifies the impact of magazine advertising investments on actual brand sales. It is an ongoing project from which we had the pleasure to receive a number of interesting cases in the past few years. They use Nielsen HomeScan consumer panel to examine week-by-week sales of each product before, during, and after the period. That's the campaign period. And that is what you see in this graph, the blue and the red line. By comparing households with and without exposure to the campaign, they can derive the sales effect of magazines. So the graph shows the average of 31 brands that were measured in this program. In the 12 months before the magazine campaign starts, you see the blue and the red lines matching each other. As soon as the campaign starts, the red line, which is the test group, shows the higher sales compared to the control group who didn't see the magazine campaign. For every month of the campaign, the sales were higher in the test group, and this holds true for every brand measured. The sales uplift was at least 10% in every case. So if you see this evidence, you start to understand why Meredith has the confidence to give advertisers a sales guarantee. But still, it's a very bold move, I think, and as yet, I haven't seen anyone following their example. So on average, the ROI across these 31 brands was $7.54, and meaning that every dollar spent by these brands in magazine advertising generated additional sales of $7.54. In this next slide, we see the ROI data from Meganomics, the Meganomics project from the UK. In general, we see that magazine advertising achieves a higher return on investment than television, internet, and newspapers. Usually this is related to underinvestment in magazines, and Guy will go deeper into that at the end of this presentation. Meganomics, which was commissioned by the PPA and conducted by media agency Mindshare in collaboration with their associated econometric modeling company OHAL, concluded the same again. I always love this cooperation with media agencies and advertisers because it makes the execution of the study much easier, but it also gives the results much more credibility. So Mindshare and OHAL analyzed econometric data from 77 real-life advertising campaigns, which spent up to £6 million. They analyzed different budget scenarios with the same budget level. An important finding was that when magazine media received a bigger part of the budget, sales consistently increased for all brands. Another key conclusion from the project was that for the 5 fast mover brands that they covered, magazine budgets would have to be at least doubled before magazine ROI dropped down to the same level as television. And I think, as you will see in the Chapter 9 of Proof of Performance, we have a lot of evidence on the high ROI of magazines. And this one I like to show. It's from the Netherlands. You see that magazines also have the highest ROI of 130. And the interesting or the nice thing about this graph is that it wasn't commissioned by any magazine association or publisher, but it was commissioned by the Newspaper Federation. And still magazines came out on top. So, and then I'll leave it to Guy to explain why this is so.
Yes, why is it we find in case after case that magazines have a high ROI compared with other media in so many cases? And I think the answer has a lot to do with the idea of diminishing returns and over or under investment in various media. I can illustrate that with this chart. It's well established that diminishing returns does apply to media expenditure. That is, once you've spent a considerable sum on advertising within a given medium, to spend a further slice of money in the same medium is likely to produce less additional sales than spending the same amount of money in another medium which has not yet reached its point of diminishing returns. So, for instance, in this particular chart, on the blue, we're comparing two media here, the blue medium and the yellow medium. The lower dot of the blue medium reflects a certain expenditure across the horizontal axis and a certain sales on the vertical axis. Now, if you spent another 100,000 units of currency in that medium, you would expect an increase in sales up to the second blue dot, which on the vertical axis is a modest though useful increase. If instead, though, you spent it in the yellow medium, which is on a steeper part of its response curve, then you would get a higher increase in sales as shown on the vertical axis. So the same extra investment can yield higher returns dependent upon the medium you've chosen. The next slide shows an actual example, a real-life campaign, where in this instance 4 media were used. And this is part of the Maganomics project in the UK, which was carried out for the PPA by Mindshare Media Agency and their econometrics associated company, OHAL. There are 4 media used, 2 TV channels, magazines and outdoor. And the actual spending levels are shown by the coloured dots. The 2 TV channels and the out-of-home channel, well, the 2 TV channels is what I want to concentrate on. They are on the part of their diminishing returns curve, which is beginning to get more and more shallow. But magazines, the purple dot, is still on a steep part of the curve. And in this particular instance, if one was going to spend an additional unit of money somewhere, it would produce higher returns than if it was put in the magazine medium than if it was put into TV, or if it was reallocated from, let us say, the blue TV curve, which is getting shallower, reallocate it to magazines. That would improve the return on investment. So that's the kind of analysis that explains why magazines are yielding higher returns on investment. It's really because of a tendency towards underinvestment in the medium. Now, when it comes to modeling this kind of data, it's very important to use the most relevant magazine data, particularly including readership accumulation data, and using that to convert the readership audience estimates into weekly ratings. And one can use that then in the models to answer various questions. Here's an example from Sweden. Again, it's an analysis by OHAL, and the question was, looking across in this instance, all of the hair care products that are long-established hair care products for Schwarzkopf in Sweden. How do TV and magazines compare in terms of creating purchase intention? The example in this instance is that magazines roughly are twice as effective as television at their respective current levels of expenditure. And in general, the further analysis by Ohal and Mindshare has shown that in order to get magazine ROI down to similar levels to that of TV, one needs to at least double expenditure in the magazine medium. Well, it's time now to draw some conclusions, so back to Esther to begin doing that.
So how do we wrap up a summary of 122 studies from over 30 countries? Guy has done a very good job in in making 12 highlights from all this data, which we have put here on 2 slides. I'll begin with the first 6. The established brand values of printed magazines continue to exist. I don't think we need to convince any of our own publishing people about that, but certainly we need to convince some advertisers and media agency people. The brand values that from printed magazines carry over to the digital platforms. We see that in a lot of researches in the book. Digital editions are used by consumers in much the same way as print. Digital edition ads are read as intensely as print ads. And interactivity in these digital ads leads to more time spent on them. And the 6 ads on publisher websites do sell products.
Magazine readers are active participants in social media. In fact, they are conversation catalysts. They generate conversations and make recommendations. Magazines yield high return on investment in terms both of key performance indicators and in terms of sales. We also have shown that underinvestment in magazines and overinvestment elsewhere is often the explanation for magazines having such a high relative ROI. On average, analysis has shown we should at least double the investment in magazines in mixed media campaigns. And a final important point is that in doing mixed media models, the correct input is vital, and that includes, doesn't always, but it should always include readership accumulation data and the use of that to spread readership estimates across weeks to get weekly magazine ratings. So there we are, that sums it up, and I'll hand back to Chris.
Guy, Esther, that's tremendous. Well done. So there are a couple of questions that have already come in. If you have questions, there's a dialog box on the left-hand side of your screen. Simply type in the question you have, and I'll put it to the 2 presenters. And when we finish the Q&As, which should only be a couple of minutes, I will explain how you can get hold of a copy of the report and indeed a copy of this presentation. So first question, Guy. This was from Romania. Is there any chapter or statistics about B2B magazines? As far as I know, consumer behavior should be different from those B2C.
Yes, thanks, Chris. No, there is nothing specifically on B2B magazine usage or effect, I'm afraid. This is very much a book about consumer magazines and consumer magazine media on all the platforms. I do know from my own experience working in magazine companies with B2B products that it is very different than consumer magazines. In this particular case, it's very much more digitally oriented than the consumer market. And also it varies considerably from one B2B market to another vertical B2B market. And it's much harder to generalize about B2B media than it is to do so about consumer magazines. But I'm sorry there's nothing here on B2B, but it wasn't part of the objectives, and there has not been much published research on it. Some research, but we have to use the published research. So if you have yourself got any of this, really useful research, we'd be pleased to hear about it and could help promulgate it ourselves. So back to you, Chris.
Yes, there's actually another question on B2B came in just as you were answering that, Guy, so I hope that clarifies that. Esther, a question for you on the Meredith sales guarantee. It's really simple. You quoted something like 30 campaigns being studied. Have they given any money back to advertisers with that guarantee?
That's a very good question, because of course, if you give a guarantee, you have to keep it. So as I understand, they haven't given any money back. But when I look at the research data, I would assume that they never needed to give any money back, because the magazine campaigns all worked so very well, and they researched them all, so they had the evidence that they worked very well, so that they didn't need to give money back. That's a good thing.
Yes, if I can just add to that, I was talking to Britta Cleveland at Meredith, who's in charge of this project, and she did confirm to me that of the 31 campaigns they've studied and the 10 digital campaigns that I mentioned on one of the charts I talked about, they had all produced positive results and no client had to have any money given back to them. So that's a clear answer to the question.
Okay, and this is the beauty of an interactive audience. As we're answering that question on the sales guarantee, we've had one of our listeners say we might direct our audience to ABM's B2B research. ABM is the Association of Business Media in the United States. They've given us a web address. We'll make that web address available on our website somehow, or we'll have a link to it. But I'm sure if you go to the ABM Association website, you will find lots of research there. So that's just some information. Another question that's come in from Italy. Are any studies available on the effectiveness of native advertising?
We are in the process of assembling some data on native advertising, but there's nothing specifically, no specific results in the Proof of Performance book about that. There is some mention of native advertising, but we haven't got the data on it, I'm afraid. It is very difficult to isolate because it's part of a completely integrated campaign, true native advertising, and separating the different marketing elements on the various social media and internet platforms is very, very difficult. And I've not myself seen any very convincing evidence on this in the consumer market. That's not to say there isn't any, but none has come to my attention. There is a print parallel, of course, in advertorials, which are not such an integrated system as the best native advertising, but there's a clear proof, and there's some of that in Proof of Performance version 2, and even more in version 1 of Proof of Performance, published a couple of years ago, showing the effectiveness of advertorials and indeed other special creative formats within print media. But digital native advertising, I'm afraid that'll have to wait for edition 3 of POP.
Maybe we can do a call to action to everyone listening for the next FIPP Research Awards, that if anyone has research on native advertising, that please send it in, either as a paper for the forum or as an entry for the awards, because we are very interested in that.
Yes, we could give a special award for the best native advertising research project.
Okay, guys. Well, look, I think we're going to have to wrap up here because I've got just a couple of slides to conclude the webinar. The slide that's been on the screen for a long time now is talking about the distribution of POP, Proof of Performance, version 2. Digital copies are going to be distributed free to all FIPP members, and by that that's FIPP members we have on our database, and that's going to be done today. This is a 156-page report. And when we skim this down to 12 key points and about 28 slides, it's a magnificent performance. But the wealth of detail and information, I commend you to look at it. It's fantastic. It's available free to anyone else on request, so it's sending an email to us, and you can see on there their email addresses for you to contact. And if you go on the FIPP website, fipp.com, not terribly difficult to remember, you'll be able to download PDFs from the website. So that's the digital copies. Printed copies, we do them on demand. Again, if you look at on the screen, you can see where you can order them from and who from at FIPP. And there will be a POP microsite which we will include lots of other material that we've collected whilst putting this report together. I've got to do some thank yous. Clearly, we couldn't do this without the help of people. Our brand partner for digital editions is Press Reader, and they've put together the digital edition of POP, and for which I'm truly, truly grateful. And interactive elements of that digital edition were made by one of our other partners, Viewer. So again, huge thanks to those two suppliers. The important dates I'd like to just note to you for the future. Our research forum, we hold a research forum every year, and next year in May, we shall be holding in Amsterdam on the 18th and 19th of May, the 9th FIPP Research Forum. So we'd love to see you there. Again, all the details will be on our website. That's where we discuss a lot of the new research and effectiveness evidence that comes out during the course of the previous 12 months. One of the ways we get people to tell us what's happening is we run research awards. Yes, you can win a gold prize for the research you do, and as Guy and Esther have just said, work on native advertising would be particularly welcome. It's quite a hot topic at the moment. So the research awards will be held during the research forum, and again, look out for information on that. We'll be announcing details this month. And every month we email out a FIPP Insight newsletter. It's again free if you just register for it on our website, and that's a monthly digest of all the hot research news, topics and information that we think the industry should know. So really something you should sign up to. So that's it. From me, from Guy, from Esther, thanks for listening. It's been a tremendous afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you very much.